You think you're being careful, but your brain has already decided who feels safe, who feels confident, and who feels untrustworthy before you've even finished the first glance. The moment you meet someone, something in you moves first, before the handshake, before the small talk, before reason has time to speak. Your mind has already built a rough version of the person in front of you, not a full portrait, just a shortcut, and that shortcut is the strange part. You do not begin with reason, you begin with speed. For a long time, people treated this as a flaw, a prejudice, a weakness of character, but psychology keeps showing something more unsettling. The human brain is not waiting patiently for all the facts. It is scanning, compressing, predicting. In a fraction of a second, it can form social impressions from a face alone. That first impression can feel tiny. In reality, it can shape everything that follows. A face, a tone of voice, a posture, the way someone holds eye contact, the speed of their smile. These tiny signals can shape the entire social story you tell yourself about them. Researchers have shown that people spontaneously infer trustworthiness, dominance, competence, and attractiveness from faces, often with surprising consistency. That is where the uncomfortable truth begins. Your mind is not merely observing a person, it is testing a theory about them, and it is doing it so quickly that the theory often arrives before the evidence. This rapid judgment is sometimes called a thin slice of perception, a tiny fragment of behavior that seems to carry a surprising amount of social information. In Nalini Ambady's famous work, people made remarkably useful judgments from very brief samples of nonverbal behavior, showing that speed does not always mean nonsense. But here is the catch. Useful is not the same thing as accurate. The brain is built to extract patterns from very little data, because for most of human history, hesitation could be costly. A delayed reaction to danger, hostility, or betrayal may have mattered more than a perfect social analysis. In that sense, snap judgment is ancient. It is not an accident. It is part of the machinery. That machinery is powerful. It is also dangerous. A first impression can be efficient without being fair. It can help you detect risk in one context and mislead you badly in another. The same mental system that helps you move quickly through a crowded room can also make you misread someone quiet, nervous, unfamiliar, or simply different from what you expected. And once the first impression lands, it behaves like an anchor. One reason first impressions feel so convincing is that faces are overloaded with meaning. We read a face and almost instantly imagine temperament, intention, status, and even moral quality. That leap feels personal, but it is really pattern recognition at work. Studies on facial impressions show that people often converge on similar judgments about traits like trustworthiness and dominance. That does not mean the judgments are true. It means the brain is using a shared social shorthand, and shorthand always leaves something out. A face can trigger a judgment because of symmetry, expression, familiarity, or cultural association. Sometimes those cues track reality a little. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they reveal something about the person. Sometimes they reveal something about you, your fears, your memories, your culture, your expectations. That is why instant judgment is so hard to trust and so hard to ignore. Once your mind labels someone, it starts looking for evidence that supports the label. If the person seemed cold at first, neutral behavior may begin to look arrogant. If they seemed warm, the exact same behavior may suddenly look thoughtful. The first judgment does not just describe the person, it changes the way you interpret everything after it. That feedback loop is the real power of instant judgment. It means the first impression is not just a snapshot, it is a filter. People often assume a quick judgment must be a deep one because it arrives with confidence. That confidence is misleading. In the 2006 work by Janine Willis and Alexander Todorov, judgments made after only 100 milliseconds correlated strongly with judgments made without time pressure. That helps explain why brief impressions feel so convincing. But confidence is not the same thing as accuracy. The brain can become more certain simply because it has already committed. That is a subtle but important difference. A quick judgment can feel like insight when it is actually commitment. The mind writes the conclusion early, then spends the rest of the interaction defending it. That is why first impressions are so difficult to change. You are not only changing an opinion, you are asking the brain to abandon a model it has already started using. And the brain hates wasted models. It would rather revise them slightly than throw them away entirely. Here is the twist. The brain's speed is useful precisely because it is incomplete. If you could not form a fast impression, social life would become unbearable. Every encounter would demand full analysis. Every stranger would be an unsolved puzzle. So the mind compresses the world into categories and probabilities. That saves energy. It helps you move through social life without reevaluating everyone from scratch. But compression always removes detail, and when detail disappears, ambiguity disappears with it. A person becomes safe, awkward, competent, fake, dominant, or weak. The middle vanishes. Yet human beings mostly live in the middle. They are mixed, inconsistent, situational, and often very different from the first signal they accidentally broadcast. That is why instant judgment can be socially costly. It affects hiring, dating, friendship, authority. Even one brief interaction can shape the opportunities someone receives afterward. In other words, your brain is not only evaluating people, it may also be helping allocate trust, attention, and respect before anyone has earned or lost them. And once that allocation begins, it can be hard to reverse. So should you stop judging people instantly? No, you probably cannot. The ability is too deeply built into social cognition, but you can become more careful about what that first judgment is allowed to do. Let it be a signal, not a verdict. Let it tell you I noticed something, not I know who this person is. That small shift matters because it creates a pause between perception and conclusion, and that pause is where fairness begins. The goal is not to erase intuition. The goal is to stop confusing intuition with truth, because the first thing you feel about a person may be real as a feeling while still being incomplete as knowledge. And those are not the same thing. You think you're meeting a person for the first time, but your brain has already met a story. The work of wisdom is learning the difference.